Deltarune's 3rd and 4th chapters just came out about 2 weeks ago and rocketed it to being one of my favorite games of all time. I'll be honest, after playing chapter 2, I thought I was going to like Deltarune, but I didn't expect it to ever surpass Undertale. Well, I still don't think it has yet, but it's sure on track to, because chapters 3 and 4 were fantastic. This game is rapidly shaping up to be an actual masterpiece, and I can't wait for more. But that begs the question, why does it work so well? Deltarune is a game with dozens and dozens of ideas, easily 10 different mysteries going on at any given time, and 5 different major worlds with at least 20 characters who all relate to each other in a massive web. It is an unbelievably complex game despite being only about 20 hours long. Just by describing it, Deltarune sounds like it would be a complete mess, but it isn't. In fact, it's just the opposite. And in this video, I'll tell you why. Also, spoilers for chapters 3 and 4. I'm going to be going over everything from the plots to the secret bosses to theories of what's really going on behind the scenes, so if you want to go in free, now's your chance to come back later. It all comes down to the power of theme. Theme has an incredible, almost magical ability to tie together wildly different ideas into a single cohesive whole, and in my opinion, it's the most underappreciated part of the trio of story. If plot and characters are the meat and potatoes, then theme is the gravy, the thing that gives it flavor, tying everything together and making it feel like a complete meal. And if anyone's wondering, world building is the nice little dessert on the side. Not really necessary, but delicious and sweet. Themes are what made Undertale work as a game. If you really think about it, Undertale is kind of a mess. It has 5 different, almost completely unrelated main areas, 9 hugely important characters, many of whom have absolutely nothing to do with each other, and an aesthetic and tone that's erratic at best and downright whiplash-inducing at worst. Right after you beat the main final boss, the one that the game's been building up to this entire time, you're greeted with the secret double final boss who came out of nowhere and who you saw like twice in the last 8 hours. Then, that boss turns into a terrifying monster made of poorly photoshopped PNGs, breaks every single rule the game ever set up, kills you a dozen times, and then runs away. That's when you discovered that there's another 2 whole routes through this game, both going in totally different directions, where you either leave the underground a dead and empty wasteland before destroying the planet, or save every one of its inhabitants by giving therapy to a god. It should be a disaster, but it isn't. And that's because every bit of the game is tied together through theme. Undertale is filled with themes of forgiveness. How pacifism is difficult but necessary. All of the main characters in those routes initially attack you because of some personal problem you need to help them solve. Instead of doing the easy thing, just fighting them to get them out of your way, you take the harder path and end up befriending them. Suddenly, all of these mostly unrelated characters feel like they're part of a whole, because they're all helping to push forward the same message. Then, once you finish True Pacifist and start fighting Asriel, everything comes together. You're up against a figure who is seemingly the embodiment of evil, a person who has shown almost nothing but sadism and hatred this entire game, but you know that can't be right. It isn't right in the world of Undertale, a world where anybody can change, and even the monsters have a bit of humanity in them. Because of the effort you put in learning his backstory and getting to know his family, you know there's good in him. After dragging the souls of your friends from out of his power and unlocking the save button, you discover the truth. Asriel is just a scared kid. He's a scared kid who's been given far too much power and doesn't know what to do. He's alone, terrified, and deeply sad. You pull him out of that, convincing him to break the barrier and give up each of the souls he's captured. And it's so satisfying. Everything comes together in the ending of Undertale's pacifist route in a way that I've only really seen in one other game. Themes are the only reason why the pacifist route in this game works. Well, the genocide route too, but that's a whole other can of worms that I can't get into right now. I'm saving that for when I finally make an Undertale retrospective at the end of the summer. Now, this sort of thing is a lot easier to do with a short game. Don't get me wrong, I'm sure Undertale wasn't easy to write at all, but at the very least, it was self-contained. It was a short, original product focusing on a relatively small cast of characters and the actions of a single protagonist. It has a lot of layers if you're willing to dig into them a bit, but those layers don't cover a lot of surface area. Undertale is only about 8 hours long. It's a bite-sized game. Deltarune, meanwhile, is about 22 hours long, barely halfway done at most, and much larger in scope. Why does it still feel cohesive? The reason Deltarune works is that it has some of the strongest theme writing I've seen in anything. Every single part of this game relates back to a few core ideas and messages, all interlinking in a perfectly coordinated dance. Let's start with the worlds. At first, the 4 dark worlds we've gotten so far don't seem to fit together at all. You've got a castle filled with characters based on pieces from different board games, a computer world where everyone's an email or an advertisement or some bit of hardware, a TV world run by a living television and inhabited only by the show's crew and an audience, and an enormous church lined with bookshelves and bits of prophecy. Besides being vaguely based on some general concept, the dark worlds don't really seem related at all. But after thinking about it for a while, you'll realize that they're all themed around some form of escapism, whether it be games, the internet, TV, or religion. Each of these lets you leave your problems behind for a bit, get a break from your worries, and indulge in something satisfying. The dark worlds take boring, ordinary objects from the real world and personify them, making them fantastical and fun. Now you might be thinking, well that's nice, but why should I care? Why does this matter? Well, it's because of the existence of the 5th and final world, the world of light. No, not that one. The world of light is a depressingly realistic, fantastical version of Earth. Sure, there are monsters, but you still have to do boring things like chores and school and church. There are no magical adventures or epic quests. It's a place where you have to deal with divorce, social isolation, sickness, pain, and death. The problems in the dark worlds are mostly fun and charming, vague little issues that can be solved with a quick conversation or a bit of swordplay, while the problems of the light world are unavoidable and specific and beautiful and horrific and sad. Kris and Susie escape to the dark world at the beginning of each chapter, have a fun adventure while jamming out to some fantastic music, save before each boss fight, and reset if they lose. But at the end, once they seal the fountain, they'll ultimately have to return to the world of the light, where their problems are real and can't be solved by loading a save. As nice as some of these indulgences may be, none of them ultimately solve your problems here on Earth. In the real world, things aren't so simple. The first time Kris and Susie go to the dark world, they learn about their destiny. They're part of a prophecy. They're going to work with Ralsei to save the world from a great calamity. And interestingly, after about a chapter, Susie ends up settling into this role very comfortably. The prophecy gives her a reason, a purpose. She's not just a social outcast, she's a hero. She's important. She has friends, people who look up to her and rely on her for help. Over the course of a few chapters, she starts getting the same high that we have when we imagine ourselves being whisked away into some great magical destiny. For the first time in her clearly troubled life, she's been worthy. She has friends. She's been loved. It doesn't matter how rough Kris and Susie have it up top, because every time they enter the dark world, they can forget all their troubles and just have some fun. But then it starts catching up to them. Little pieces of the light world start showing up in the dark. 2 of their classmates end up getting trapped there too. Both of them start messing with things based on the previous problems in their life. Birdley, yes, that is his name. The names in Toby Fox games are really stupid, but honestly, I find that really charming. Is a massive nerd with very low self-esteem and some clear issues with parental approval. So the moment he finds out he's in a different dimension filled with sci-fi tech, magic, and a powerful monarch named Queen, he immediately joins her side. Suddenly, the main character's annoying classmate is the aggravating, mommy issue-having, approval-seeking henchman of the main antagonist of the chapter. And worse yet, he has a massive, unrequited crush on Noelle, the other classmate who ends up falling into the dark world with them. The dark world is still a place of escapism, but they're starting to see problems from the light world show up in the dark with them. Also, I literally just remembered this as I was editing the video. Queen's entire motivation in Chapter 2 is wanting to help everyone out with their depressing lives in the light world. It's a lot easier to forget compared to Tenna, because Tenna's a lot more broken up about it and Queen doesn't broadcast it as much. Plus, she's also motivated by a huge ego and just kind of hating you. But yeah, she also totally wants to build a big escapism utopia for everyone. Being a computer, she reads all of Nobel's depressing Google searches and comes up with the best plan a controlling narcissist can. Just taking over the world and being in charge. When she figures out why that wouldn't work, she's like, damn, that sucks, and joins your side. It's pretty cool, honestly. She stays all narcissistic and weird, but just as a sort of ally instead of a sort of enemy. It gets worse in Chapter 3. First of all, Kris's mom, Toriel, falls in and is trapped in an eternal slumber. Kris and Susie need to save her, or they legitimately might not ever get her back. On top of that, the main villain of the chapter is Tenna, the Dreamer family's old, mostly abandoned TV. Back in the day, the Dreamers would invite the holidays over to watch the specials with them, and Tenna would be happy and feel wanted. But then their family relationships started to break down. Asriel went off to college, and Asgore and Toriel got into more fights. They started arguing, and, well, now Toriel's a single mother. That's right! The main antagonist is only doing what he's doing because of the Dreamer family divorce. In this chapter, Kris's problems from the light world are impossible to ignore. Kris can't just run away from their worries and enjoy a fun, short fantasy adventure anymore. Even their escapism isn't an escape. And then, at the end of the chapter, the night comes barging in. This malevolent beast has arrived to destroy their fantasy and kill them. After a short fight that you will swiftly lose, the night captures Undyne. Now, not only is there a night directly threatening Ralsei and almost all of their new friends, but Kris and Susie have to deal with the police chief of their town being kidnapped kidnapped by a terrifying supernatural entity. This leads right into chapter 4, where we discover that Des has the code to the Knight's shelter hidden in her guitar. The Dark World isn't even really a separate world anymore. It's just an extension of the problems our characters suffer in the light. Then, once we finally get to this chapter's Dark World, the heroes discover that their fun little prophecy is being completely destroyed by the Knight. Their perfect destiny, the fate they took comfort in, is breaking right before their eyes. This hits Ralsei especially hard. He's built his whole identity about being the Prince from the Darkner destined to help the Lightner heroes save the world from calamity. He's been trying to keep them happy this whole time, to let them have their nice escapist fantasy. But eventually, the artifice breaks down, and he's forced to admit that their story isn't going to end happily. The escapist fantasy wasn't ever really a fantasy in the first place. As fun and joyful as a lot of the Dark World is, it isn't going to stay that way. The thing is, almost all of these problems could have been solved in the light world. Kris or their classmates could have reached out to Susie and helped her integrate into the school. Berdly could have worked out all his insecurities, and if Noelle had the courage to tell him to buzz off, then chapter 2 would have been a whole lot easier. If Toriel and Asgore hadn't divorced, there wouldn't have been a conflict in chapter 3 at all, and chapter 4 very well may never have happened. The escapism in Deltarune stops being an escape very quickly. The Dark Worlds are a way for the characters to avoid their problems, rather than deal with them while they can still stop a catastrophe. Now, you may be hearing this and thinking, wow, that's brutal and kinda dumb. The whole message of this game is escapism bad? What am I supposed to do, just never have fun? And no, that's what makes it so nice. Deltarune never implies that escapism is necessarily a bad thing at all. It's important. We all need a bit of an escape from our real world every now and then, and there's nothing wrong with indulging in a bit of fantasy. It's especially vital for people like Kris, Susie, and Noelle, who all clearly need a bit of levity in their lives. The message is, instead, that our real world and our escapism aren't as separate as we'd like to think. They link together in all sorts of uncomfortable ways. If you're depressed, playing video games for 10 hours a day might feel nice, but it isn't going to solve the problems in your life. It isn't going to pay rent or put food on the table. It won't make you healthy or get you real-world friends. And you can't even really enjoy the game, since you know that when you finally go to bed and wake up the next morning, you're still going to be lonely and hungry and sad. Escapism only works in small doses, as a way of recharging your batteries and letting you tackle your problems more effectively. And it does work. Each of the characters who visits a Dark World comes out of it a better person. Berdly gets over his insecurities, Noelle stands up for herself and gets her senpai to notice her, and Susie goes from being a violent, hungry, terrifying outcast to a well-fed, semi-integrated member of society with a solid crew of friends. This theme is what makes the first 4 chapters of Deltarune feel like one cohesive whole. Even though the main goals of each chapter are wildly different, they all still work toward the same message, that escapism is vitally important, but not a solution to all of your problems. You need to take the lessons you learned from your favorite stories and apply them to your real life. Clean up your act, make some friends, gain a bit of self-confidence, and that'll make your fantasies all the more enjoyable. It definitely helps that each of the important characters is clearly going through something pretty severe. Kris is a misfit living in the shadow of their popular older brother. They're an outcast, nearly mute, non-binary, and clearly very neurodivergent. They have trouble communicating in anything above a mumble, don't make eye contact, and don't understand most social graces, and have a lot of unusual habits that nobody else seems to understand. They don't fit into the town's rigid notions of how a person should act, and it clearly makes life very hard for them. Susie arguably has it even worse. It's heavily implied that she's either homeless or stuck in a particularly nasty part of the foster system. She has to scavenge the town to get enough to eat, is absolutely terrifying to all of her peers, and is mocked constantly by just about everyone in town. She built up a veneer of violence as a defense mechanism, so at least people won't insult her to her face anymore. So when she's transported to a world where she can take out all of her righteous anger without any consequences, she takes full advantage of it. Ralsei is a Darkner with an incredibly low sense of self-esteem. He's been lonely all his life and refuses to take initiative to improve his situation in any way before Susie forces him to. Berdly's built a whole complex around his inadequacies. He's in incessant need to feel smarter than everybody else because he's too scared to share his personality and clearly has very severe approval issues, all while really not being all that intelligent. And then there's Noelle, who clearly suffers from very deep social anxiety and has been acting as a doormat for Berdly and just about everyone she meets for her whole life. On top of that, her sister is missing, her dad is very sick, and her mother is harsh, cold, and distant. None of them are happy people at all. They're all teens who desperately want an escape from their lives. They're the kind of folks who would hear the concept of Neverland and ask where they could sign up. And so when the Dark World is dropped in front of them, they dive right in. They all feel like kids cut from the same cloth, because even though all of their problems are pretty different, they all fundamentally lead to them coping in similar ways. Speaking of which, if you want to cope, Okay, look, I'll be honest, I don't know where I'm going with this transition. I wanted to find some place to put in a plug at some point, but there really weren't any good spots in this video. So, subscribe, please. Also, I got the Ko-fi working again. It's in the description. If you like my content and want to support me monetarily, there's no better way to do that than to sign up there. You can do either a one-time or a monthly payment of a few dollars, both of which will support me a ton, so I have the time to research, write, and edit these. Thank you. Also coming at you in post, if you're wondering where these sick new puppets came from, a friend of mine drew them while I was editing. He went super overboard. Seriously, my old avatar looked like this and had a grand total of about 20 expressions. My friend ended up drawing about 20 individual mouths. With all of the eyes and poses he also drew, there are over 100,000 possible combinations. What the hell? So a massive thank you to him as well. Now back to the video. The main character's issues also tie into Deltarune's other major theme, abandonment. All 5 of them have been left behind by society in some way or another. Kris and Susie are friendless and lonely. Susie is also possibly homeless. Birdly is mostly just laughed at. Nobody understands Noelle, and Ralsei is the prophesized prince of a kingdom with a population of 1. They feel constrained by society's expectations of who they should be, and their isolation has led them all into deeply self-destructive behavior. This happens to line up perfectly with each of the secret bosses so far. Every chapter of Deltarune has a short little secret plotline with a boss at the end. All of them play into the meta-narrative of the game. Basically, the night, the true overarching meaning of the prophecy, and the nature of the Deltarune. The 4 secret bosses are wildly different. I mean, in one crew we have a demonic jester, a spam email given human form, the final boss of an ancient NES game, and the dead author of an unfinished, forgotten masterwork book series. Plus Tenna in a way too, a TV that's gone unused for presumably years. At first, they don't seem to have anything in common. They might all be fun in isolation, sure, but nothing more than that. But then, filled with the power of theme, they end up coming together as so much more. Each of the bosses has been abandoned by the world in some way. They all feel trapped by their societies, similar to our heroes, and are seeking some form of freedom. Javel was a formerly well-loved and well-established court jester in the Card Kingdom. Then he met somebody strange, went mad, and was locked away. From his perspective, he was thrown into a dungeon for just wanting to play games. Like the Joker in a deck of cards, Javel is left out. He's cut off from the rest of his society. But in this, he believes he's achieved a sort of freedom. He lives outside of the rules and regulations of society, and can now act in any way he wants. Spamton is stuck in a similar situation. A while ago, he was the king of the world. He was the voice in every radio, the face on every billboard. As he says it, a big shot. All thanks to the help of a little someone who contacted him by phone one day. Then, just as suddenly as his success started, it all fell apart. The person on the phone cut contact without warning, and everything collapsed. He was abandoned by his friends, his fans, and his secret benefactor, and started dumpster diving in Cyber City to survive. He's desperate to achieve the freedom that came with fame and power, the ability to call his own shots and make his own deals. After gaining a bit of power once again, he seems to realize that Kris's soul is the key to emancipation, as in-universe, the human soul is heavily implied to be what allows a person to make their own decisions, independent of Deltarune's prophecy. It's the ability to save, load, and reset, to try things over and over and over again until you get what you want. Then we get to Chapter 3 with Tenna and the old video game Mantle. The show Tenna is running is based largely around a new, reworked version of an old video game. The game is called Mantle, a Legend of Zelda-style RPG where the player is allowed freedom of exploration. Mantle itself is forgotten and old, abandoned by society the same way the secret bosses were. Tenna is like Spamton in his prime, with adoring fans, a whole crew behind him, and a fully fledged TV show. Then he gets abandoned by the Dreamer family and his entire entourage, and completely breaks down. On top of that, the little voice in his phone stops contacting him. This chapter is fascinating because we're watching the process of a new secret boss being created. Considering he was in contact with the Knight, and was dealing with issues of abandonment, it's very clear he was going to fall like Spamton and Javel did. But once he changes for the better, once his problems are solved, he is no longer useful, so the Knight kills him. There's a consistent pattern here so far. Somebody formerly in a position of high status is abandoned by their fans, the people they worked for, and the Knight. In desperation, they turn to darker powers to get a taste of their former social status. They're a reflection of what the protagonists could become if their abandonment issues aren't solved. Gerson is the character that breaks this pattern, and he does so in a very interesting way. See, Gerson, the Hammer of Justice, has also been abandoned by society. Some of you may be surprised to hear this, considering he doesn't really mention it much, but he and his book series were left behind. He was an accomplished author in his day, sure, but now his story has been largely forgotten. He finished the first book, but past that wasn't able to complete the series. Instead of continuing the plot, the next generation left his story incomplete, leaving it to rot while forgetting his book due to the numerous more popular adaptations. Gerson, however, isn't better at all. It's the nature of life to move on, and he's grateful that his book is still being appreciated, even if it's only through an echo. On top of that, he goes out of his way to teach Susie new skills, the opposite of the teachers in the light world, who have all abandoned her. He represents a better way out, which is why he still fits as a secret boss. These 4.5 wildly different characters all work together as a single cohesive whole, while also directly relating back to the problems of our seemingly unrelated main characters, all through the power of theme. If the characters are living on the corkboard of plot, then theme is the red string connecting them all together. Everything is fitting into place. Then there's the weird route. I'm going to give a bit of a content warning for this part of the video. This path through the game covers some pretty rough subjects, and if you're sensitive to that sort of thing, I suggest you bow out now. The weird route flips everything on its head. Halfway through chapter 2, we have the option to grab Noelle, take her with us, and force her down a dark path. That's the thing about our protagonists. They're vulnerable, they're antisocial and self-destructive, and that makes them very easy to take advantage of. This applies to none of them more than Noelle. Now, Noelle is a kind and warm person and clearly doesn't want to hurt anybody. However, she's also an anxious mess with incredible powers, able to turn any and all opponents into ice with just one spell. This makes it both extremely easy and useful to manipulate her. You pull Noelle away from the main plot of the chapter and gradually steal away her freedom, one piece at a time. The weird route starts by diverting her back, forcing her to freeze every enemy you come across with the spell Ice Shock. After a few rounds of that, you attempt to buy the freeze ring from an Addison, but find it too expensive. Instead of just walking away, you force Noelle to kill the Addison by using Ice Shock. She briefly blacks out, and once she's back, she finds an empty store and a freeze ring in her hands. You keep pushing every one of her boundaries by forcing her to freeze more enemies, putting her in the way of her fears, and even nearly shoving her back into a deadly wall of electricity. Noelle keeps trying to rationalize your actions, always putting herself as the one at fault. She's wrong for being suspicious of Kris. She's wrong for being selfish. She's ungrateful. After all, Kris is just trying to make her stronger. But in reality, by going down this optional path, by exercising your freedom to choose, you are robbing Noelle of her own agency, her own rights as a person. Eventually, you come across Spamton in a dumpster who will sell you the Thorn Ring. Once you buy it, Noelle gains access to a new spell, Snowgrave. Just a bit after that, you encounter Birdly, her hilarious old friend from the normal route. Noelle doesn't even look up to see who it is. She isn't going to make her own decisions anyway. She has completely given up her right to choose. She starts to protest again once she recognizes Birdly, but doesn't leave. You get enough TP to cast Snowgrave, but Noelle says she doesn't know it. She refuses to cast it, gaining back just a bit of the agency she had before. And then, once she finally tries to prove you wrong, her eyes glaze over. She floats into the air as if possessed, and casts the spell. Birdly is frozen in a crystal of ice, and Noelle falls to the ground. For just a moment, she was completely depersoned. All semblance of who she was left her, as you took control. The Snowgrave route is the dark route of Deltarune, and it is absolutely chilling, no pun intended. Watching Noelle go from anxious, kind, and quiet to a nervous, gaslit mess with a kill count is terrifying. She loses almost all semblance of who she was before over the course of just a few hours. And then, once she finally falls from her possession, she gets up and simply leaves, refusing to believe she could have done what she did. She has completely dissociated. Later on in chapter 4, when you arrive at her house, she seems to have recovered a bit. She's still shaken, but her veneer of control is back up. Kris takes their soul, you, out of their body and traps you in the vents. After that, Noelle pulls Kris aside to have a quick chat. Now, though, you've escaped and re-entered Kris. Noelle nudges toward you and starts talking about how after you told her that it was all just a bad prank and not to talk about it. She keeps trying to bring the topic up, but each time, Kris, struggling, puts their hand over her mouth. They're not afraid of some other character hearing. They're afraid of you, the player. But it's too late. You've taken control once again. You begin reading Noelle's thoughts as if they were text on a screen. Suddenly, every bit of progress Noelle has made drops away. She tests you, getting more and more scared as you slowly groom her into becoming your weapon. You grab the thorn ring, the one you acquired back in Chapter 2, and edge toward her, forcing her to put it on. And when she does, she breaks. It's horrifying, completely gut-wrenching. You, the player, are taking advantage of her anxiety and insecurity and making her into a tool. And all the worse, Kris, the character you play as, is trying to force you to stop the entire time. When I first played the Snowgrave route, I had a realization. Oh my god. This is everything I didn't sign up for. This is the opposite of what makes the normal route great. And in that way, it's brilliant. Instead of being forced on a linear path with your friends, being trapped but happy, you are gaining your freedom by stealing it from somebody else. You are forcing Kris, who is very much their own person, into brainwashing Noelle to be your weapon. In addition, it's theorized that this image right here is you implanting a bit of the soul into Noelle. If that bit of soul grows, Noelle may end up being just as much of a puppet as Kris is. As genuinely scary and fascinating as Undertale's genocide route was, it doesn't hold a candle to the sheer discomfort I felt on the Snowgrave route. It's a level of horrifying personal distress I've only ever really gotten from one other game. Of course, if you've seen my last video, you know I can't tell you which one that is yet. I think there's something to be said for that level of discomfort. Deltarune never portrays what you can do on the Snowgrave route as anything right. In fact, it takes Noelle's side in every single situation. It's very clear the whole time as you play that your actions are wrong, that you are slowly becoming the villain of the game. Whenever I play a game that makes me do that, it gives me a special level of empathy for the characters I end up hurting in the process. I know they aren't real, of course, but that doesn't change my feeling sorry for them. By focusing in so much on Noelle's mental state, how your horrible, controlling actions affect her, the Snowgrave route does this better than just about any video game I've ever played. It's impossible to not feel sympathy for Noelle during this route, even though you're the one calling the shots. And much like Undertale's genocide route, the only thing that pushes you forward is a grim curiosity about how it's going to end. Deltarune is fascinating. It really is. It's only 20 hours long, but it feels like an epic already. The characters in this game do so much over the course of their relatively short 4 chapters, meet dozens of important people, all with their own goals, fears, and flaws, uncover mysteries behind their own religion and town, and travel through 4 wildly different and complicated dark worlds. It's interesting, charming, and absolutely hilarious, but best of all, everything is connected. Every single bit of Deltarune feels like an interlocking piece in a massive, beautiful puzzle. Themes are what makes Deltarune a game that takes place in 5 different dimensions, following a crew of misfits in their adventures to stop a cart, a computer, a TV, and an eldritch abomination, all while discovering the secrets behind an impish court jester, a sentient spam email, an ancient forgotten video game, and the dead author to stop the plans of a shadowy warrior of the dark. Work. Deltarune's themes take dozens and dozens of seemingly unrelated plot elements and tie them all together, linking them into a grand, elaborate weave, and it's jaw-dropping. The game is still only about half over, so I can't even imagine how beautiful that tapestry is going to look in a few years. Personally, I can't wait. With that said, if you hated the video, please leave a dislike and a comment telling me how I can improve. If you liked it, then I will grant you the freedom Spamton never had and tell you to do whatever the heck you want. Thank you, goodbye, and I'll see you someday in the future.